Hello comrades, Kami-sa Bro here today with a quick Superpower 2 tutorial. This isn't like my other economic tutorials. This one is actually focusing purely on governmental types. A lot of people ask questions in regards to what's the differences between the countries, why don't you play as this country, why don't you play as that country, so on and so forth. Well, let me go ahead and take the time to explain what the difference is between these countries so you understand why I like to play as a multi-party democracy. We'll start with a multi-party democracy. A multi-party democracy, advantage-wise, has the highest resource production. It generally has low corruption and has a very low risk of successful coup d'etats through covert action. Now, its disadvantages. The player must win an election every 4 years. They have the highest resource consumption, high government or administration spendings. They have the highest negative impact on stability ratio of a high military force / population ratio, which essentially means that the more military you have for your population, you'll take a stability hit for it. And a very high negative impact on the approval rating when declaring war, which is pretty much as is. If you declare war, your people will hate you for it. So, that's a multi-party democracy. As you can see, it has more disadvantages than it does advantages. However, what makes it really good is that high resource production, which generally allows it to escape, produce resources faster than other countries. It also has very low corruption. That low corruption is great. Especially I'm playing as the United States right now to kind of demonstrate that example. Obviously the United States has a butt ton of resources right at the beginning of the game. The United States is stupid rich, way richer than any other country in the world at this time, and even has the most powerful military, so on and so forth. And they are a multi-party democracy. So, let's go ahead and take a look at a single-party democracy. China, for example, is a single-party democracy, as you can see. Now, the advantages of a single-party democracy are the elections are always won, as the political party in power is the only legal one. High resources production, which is very true, however, it's not as high as a multi-party democracy. Reduced negative impact of a high military force population ratio on stability rating. So basically, you don't get as big of a hit from having a large military. Again, a low risk of successful coup d'etats, and a negative impact on approval rating when declaring war. So that's still kind of a bad thing, but it's not as negative as you get from the multi-party democracy. Disadvantages, major disadvantages. High resource consumption, high government spendings, and incredibly high corruption. So, as you can see, China has really high corruption. Now, that can be paid off if China specs into it, but more than likely it's not going to happen. Not in this game, unless someone's playing as China. So, what's the next one, you ask? Well, the next one would be communism. Unfortunately, no game or no country in Superpower 2 plays the communism tree. They're all single-party democracy. So I can't really show that to you, but I can swap over to a communism, and we can just see what happens if I swap the U.S. to a communist state. We take a big stability hit, a minor approval rating hit. Mostly what will be affected is, if I'm not mistaken, our income, which is slowly going to go down over time, I think. But then again, maybe it won't. I know that it does bring down the unit upkeep. So, but anyway, let me actually give a idea of what the advantages and disadvantages are. With communism, you have no elections, low resource consumption, low corruption, and a low risk of successful coup d'etats. That's great. However, you have low resources production. You have the highest governmental spendings. There's a negative impact on the approval rating when declaring war, and it has the highest negative impact of a high military force to population ratio in regards to your stability. And as you can see, our income has gone down about 25% by swapping over to a communist state. But then again, we're spending a lot less on actual budget sliders. So it's not that big of a deal, but it is kind of a thing. It is definitely there. So, what's some of the other governmental types? Well, you have monarchy, where there's no elections, low resource consumption, low negative impact on the approval rating when declaring war, reduced negative impact on stability rating with a high military force, increased diplomatic relations bonus with other monarchies, and low governmental spendings. Those are all great benefits. However, disadvantages. There's a high risk of a successful coup d'etat, low resource production, and very high corruption. You also have a theocracy, where there are no elections. There's, again, a reduced negative impact of a high military force, low resource consumption, low corruption, low negative impact on the approval rating when declaring war, and low governmental spendings. So it's very similar to monarchy. However, disadvantages. High impact of religion's distribution on stability rating. A country run by a theocracy will become less stable as the number and proportion of religions practiced by the population increases. You also have low resource production and a high risk of successful coup d'etats. Now, there's only two other forms of governments. However, only one is really a government type, and that would be military dictatorship, where there are no elections, very low impacts on the approval rating when declaring war, positive impact of a high military force, reduced military units upkeep, reduced time for changing military units status from part to ready, very low resource consumption, and very low governmental spending. However, with disadvantages come very low resource production, high corruption, and an extremely high risk of a successful coup d'etat. Last, but most definitely least, is anarchy, where there are literally no advantages, and the disadvantages are overwhelming. There's the very high risk of a successful coup d'etat. Resource production is completely halted. All military units production is on hold. Revenues are reduced to zero. There's extremely high corruption. And worst of all the other ones are manageable in my opinion, but the worst of all is a country cannot propose any treaty at all. So, with that in mind, an anarchy is the worst possible thing that could happen to your fledgling nation. And that generally happens through rebellion. If you get nuked, your stability falls below 10%, I think the number is. And it's most definitely the worst. Overall, it's terrible. You do not want to be a anarchy in Superpower 2. You can't win. Especially if you play the rebels. You just can't win. So, yeah, that's kind of why I don't like that. However, let it be said that the other governmental types are really not that bad. Communism. Communism's not that bad to play as. We'll swap the U.S. back over to communism again and see what happens. My money should go down, if I'm not mistaken. We're going to dump down propaganda a bit because I'm not that concerned about propaganda. Let's take a look at the rest of the world. So, basically, that gives you oh, look at that, man. That brings us to a positive balance. So that gives you a base overview of what the differences between the governmental types are. Again, I don't stray too far from multi-party democracy, single-party democracy, or even communist state, just because they tend to be the best ones. Everything else is kind of in the terms of how it performs. I mean, a military dictatorship's not too bad if you're at war, or if you're getting nuked, or, there's a nuclear war about to happen. However, in the overall scheme of things, in the long run anyway, you don't want to remain as that type of country. So it's best to be multi-party, single-party, or communist, just because you have relatively high resource production rates, especially multi-party democracy, where you get the highest overall production of resources you can get. So that's basically why I picked that government type for almost all of my playthroughs. I'm sure you guys notice that I don't often swap to anything else. But anyway, this has been Commissar Bro, and I hope that this assists everyone who plays Superpower 2 to understand what the differences between the government types. It helps everybody understand more how the game actually plays. What I read to you was straight out of the game manual. You can find it. I'll even link you where I found the PDF for it. And I feel like it'll help people out if you ever find any other additional information that you need. If not, I'll see you guys next time.